Hello, everyone. This is Jeffrey Kerr. I'm back here with Alex Meyer to discuss awards predictions. And so, we're okay. We're about 3 days away from Oscar nominations announcements, and Alex and I are here to discuss our predictions for nominations in every single category. But this year, we'll be doing it in 3 parts, starting with the main above the line categories, which are picture, director, all 4 acting categories, and both screenplay categories. And so, what better place to start than with best picture, which, okay, it's a race that's really heating up. I mean, there's literally, well, I guess you can make a case for almost a lot of the films in the conversation, but there seems to be 3 films the that are out front that could win, like A Star Is Born, Black Klansman, or Roma. So Alex, well, okay, so Alex and I will each be taking turns reading going back and forth, reading off our rankings before the other. So Alex, I'll let you read off your rankings, your predicted rankings for Best Picture first, from first to last place. I mean, which we should say that even though the Academy since 2011 has been, going, has a sliding scale of number of Best Picture nominees from 5 to 10. I mean, Gold Derby at least still allows you to predict 10 nominees, so that way, hey, you at least have a good shot getting all of them right, even if one of them misses. So, Alex?
All right, so my Best Picture rankings are Roma, A Star Is Born, The Favorite, Green Book, Black Klansman, Black Panther, Bohemian Rhapsody, Vice, If Beale Street Could Talk, and First Man.
Okay, I have all those same films in my rankings as well, though in slightly different order. Like, I actually have Stars Born ranked in third because of course, this is from the main critics awards like Golden Globes and Critics' Choice, where it's kind of been losing steam a little. I mean, we'll see what the industry says. Like, in fact, PGA happens to be taking place today, so it should be interesting to see what they choose for Best Picture, especially since they utilize the same voting system as the Oscars do for Best Picture, which is a preferential ballot.
Plus, A Star Is Born has scored with all but one of the guilds in terms of nominations, with the only one missing out on is visual effects for obvious reasons.
Yeah.
There's not really any visual effects in it.
Well, yes. I mean, at least not to the scale of something like a Black Panther or even a First Man.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but I actually, although I do agree, I do have Roma out front right now, but I actually have Black Klansman in second place.
Well, it's just I have Black Klansman a little lower just because the fact that it hasn't really won any major industry honors yet, and even though it might win some big honors, like it still hasn't gotten as much momentum as like the other contenders I have listed before it. So,
Well,
I
that's
mean,
true.
I would personally like to see it win since it was my number one best film of 2018. I mean, I'd vote for it in a lot of categories if I were an Oscar voter, or at least in the nomination stage, depending on what branch I was a part of in. But once the final stage is over, you can vote for all the awards once the final ballots come out.
Well, yes, and of course, it probably just is me over. I mean, who knows? Either I'm overestimating it, or you're underestimating it, or I don't know. But I just have the sense they know. I could just see them. I mean, who knows? Maybe history could just repeat itself for Alfonso, like 2013 when Alfonso Cuarón won Best Director for Gravity. Yeah, Best Picture went to 12 Years a Slave from a black filmmaker, Steve McQueen. So, I mean, who knows? History could repeat itself this year with Cuarón winning Director for Roma. Yet Black Klansman wins Best Picture, another black director, Spike Lee.
True, but in those cases, in the previous case, 12 Years a Slave had pretty much been sweeping the Critics Circle Awards and it won all the big precursor prizes for the most part. Same with Alfonso Cuarón in directing, so it kind of was a no-brainer at that point.
Well, yeah, that's true. I mean, I guess we'll see.
Whereas Black Klansman hasn't really maybe won a handful of critics prizes, whereas like the big winners so far has been Roma.
Well, yes, I mean, we shall see what the industry says because we've seen in the past of how, there's a great divide between critics and the industry. Like we saw a few years ago when Boyhood swept all the critics awards and people say, oh, well, that's an easy lock for Best Picture. But then the industry had their say it and was like, no, it's Birdman. And a few years
Or
before that,
the social network in the King's
I
Speech.
was literally about to bring that up. Yeah, the social network was sweeping through all the critics' awards, and so early on, Bill's like, "Oh well, that's a lock for Best Picture." But then the industry had their say, and like, no, it's the King's Speech. So you just never know. I mean, don't always take everything the critics say with a grain of salt.
Yeah, well, the King's Speech, we kind of also have Harvey Weinstein to thank for that.
Well, yes, of course, whose name will not be in the Oscar race anymore.
Nope, and plus he's been kicked out of the Academy,
Yeah,
and also, well, three people have actually been kicked out in the last year: Harvey Weinstein, Bill Cosby, and Roman Polanski.
and I'm sure people are waiting for Kevin Spacey to be kicked out soon.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing with all these people that have been kicked out. The ones that have been kicked out are the ones who've actually been literally slapped with criminal charges.
Hmm. Yeah.
Whereas the only other Academy member who was ever expelled was actor Carmine Caridi because he gave his screeners to a fan who wrote a letter to him saying, "Oh, I'm a movie buff. Can you just please give me these screeners since you get them?" And he said, "Sure," because he thought he was being a nice guy and helping him out, even though the Academy rules specifically said, "Do not distribute your screeners to anyone."
Hmm.
And this guy ended up leaking them onto the internet.
Uh-huh. Yeah. So anyway, back to the Oscar race now. Okay, so and plus I could just see, Black Klansman being a consensus choice for Best Picture. I mean, unlike say Green Book, which has its share of controversies, so I think it makes sense to have it ranked a little higher than Green Book, even though it just did well at the Globes. And it's not to mention a couple of its key people involved behind the scenes are in deep trouble with the press, which we'll be getting to a little later.
Yeah, and I some of those categories I'm not predicting some of those people, but like even if but Green Book at least seems to have been for the most part well embraced by critics and audiences, and we know the Academy has had a history of awarding these types of good films that kind of sh- showcase overcoming racism, or at least one person learning to be more tolerant of others, kind of because in Green Book, Viggo Mortensen's character isn't exactly the most uh, tolerant of black people because he like literally throws out glasses that were being used by black repairmen in his house. But then, of course, over the course of the movie, he then learns to appreciate and respect African Americans when he has to drive Mahershala Ali's character throughout the Deep South. So, and we've seen them award these types of films before, like Driving Miss Daisy.
Well, yeah,
But
but obviously that was a much different academy back then.
true, but many of those Academy members that were around back then are still around now because
Hmm.
you're an Academy member for life.
Yes,
So,
unless you get
but
kicked out like Weinstein, like we talked about.
plus its wins at the Golden Globes, I think, kind of push it a little higher if they pay attention to that. So,
Mhm. Well, yes. Though, no. Then again, I've seen some people. Though I am aware some people just did not like the film, but of course that's a whole nother discussion.
plus Black Klansman's ending has gotten a lot of controversy from some people because there are some people who feel that the ending showcasing the Charlottesville riots was too tacked on, and like some have accused Spike Lee of being too political by trying to like bash people in the head. And Spike Lee, I think he admitted it was a last minute decision to put the footage in the film, but I personally thought it worked. But I
Well,
mean,
yeah. I thought that was definitely a perfect reminder of why the events depicted in Black Klansman feels very relevant to what's going on in the world now.
hmm and I know Martin Scorsese recently praised the ending of that film, so I have a strong feeling he'll support it in his Oscar ballot.
Yeah.
Um,
Well,
ba-
yeah.
basi- basically, almost all these films have some sort of controversy attached to them this
I had
year.
their own share of detractors. Yes.
Green Book with its accusations of being too lightweight, Black Klansman with controversy about the ending, Bohemian Rhapsody with historical inaccuracies and the fact that Bryan Singer was directing it in the first place,
And was
wrote
fired near the end of principal photography.
and still received primary director's credit.
Well, yeah, because he made most of it, though they did at least give executive producer credit to Dexter Fletcher, who came in at the last minute to save it, for the most part.
Mhm. Then you have, let's see,
First Man had that controversy with the moon flag or something.
yep, some have accused Roma of focusing too much on upper class privilege. A Star is Born. Some people feel it's just too much of a retread of the original films. Uh, some of Vice. Some people think it's too positive in its portrayal of Dick Cheney. Because like I've seen some critics label Vice as the absolute worst movie of 2018. I'm like, really? It's not a perfect movie, but like worse than Life of the Party, Gotti, uh, Spy Who Dumped Me, worse than those films? Give me a break.
Hmm. Yeah, and
And then yeah, and
and
of course there's some people who don't want to see Black Panther in here because it's a comic book superhero movie, whatever you want to call it.
well, yeah, and I actually did finally watch that film on Netflix last night, and I'd say as just a superhero movie, yeah, I enjoyed it. It was fun, but as an Oscar movie, I don't see that. But of course, I have to be realistic with my predictions here.
Mm. All right, so
Now on to what about the favorite? What's the controversy behind that?
uh, I don't really think there hasn't really been any controversy. I guess there's some people who feel that the I guess there's some people who don't like the lesbian love triangle aspect of the story, and of course, those are kind of the bigoted conservatives who make that kind of a argument. And I know PETA has, I think, well, I don't know if PETA. I know there's some people might not like that you have scenes showcasing like lobsters racing each other, but it's not like we actually see any animals being harmed on screen. Well,
Hmm.
they do, they do shoot pigeons, but I'm guessing they obviously must have. I highly doubt they actually shot real pigeons while filming.
Yeah, oh yeah. So I guess now on to a best director. Okay, so the lineup I have right now is Alfonso Cuarón, Roma, Spike Lee, Black Klansman, Bradley Cooper, A Star Is Born, Yorgos Lanthimos, The Favorite, and Adam McKay, Vice.
Well, I have four of the five, but in a slightly different lineup. I have Alfonso Cuarón in first, but then I have Bradley Cooper in second because I just feel with Roma and A Star Is Born being the top two for Best Picture, I think it makes sense to have those two competing as director. And then I have Spike Lee in third because I could feel that the Oscars might give him another category and therefore might not feel compelled to give it to him here in the directing category.
Well, you could say the same thing about Alfonso Cuarón, who's likely to contend in multiple categories.
True, but like with Alfonso Cuarón, he's like in going to be contending in about five categories. So
Yeah.
it's like
So
and Spike Lee only was the writer and director
and
where
producer.
and producer, and whereas Alfonso Cuarón was all those plus cinematographer and editor.
Yeah.
But then I have Yorgos Lanthimos in fourth place, and for fifth place, we always have that surprise directing nominee that like no one seems to see coming, like with last year with Paul Thomas Anderson and Phantom Thread, the year before with Mel Gibson and Hacksaw Ridge, and then the other year with Lenny Abrahamson for Room.
Hmm.
So my guess here, and I'm gonna put him in here because I think the Academy is gonna be a big fan of his work in the from now until whenever, however long his career lasts. And I have Barry Jenkins for If Beale Street Could Talk.
Ooh, okay, that's interesting. I mean, he hasn't gotten in anywhere among the major precursors such as Critics' Choice, Golden Globes, BAFTA, and DGA. I mean, he did just win the Critics' Choice for Adapted Screenplay, though, but then again, there might have been an IOU to him there, given that he did not win for Moonlights there 2 years before.
Could be, but I mean, Paul Thomas Anderson didn't really get any major love in the
That's
directing
true.
category for Phantom Thread last year. So, I have a feeling if Beale Street Could Talk could probably do a lot better here than it's done anywhere else, given that
Well, I'm sorry.
I'm just saying I have a feeling if Beale Street Could Talk could do a lot better here than it's done anywhere else, just because of its story. Even though it's set in the 1970s, it deals with a lot of things that are very relevant now. Plus, it's based on a novel from an iconic African American author, James Baldwin, and
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 this
Barry
is the. Oh, sorry.
Jenkins. I think he's kind of become regarded almost as kind of like his generation's Martin Scorsese in a way, with tackling these very serious issues as well as depicting like life in urban environments, which Scorsese has become known for.
Hmm. Well, that is. Well, I could see that be happening. I mean, we should. I mean,
Plus,
although I. Oh, sorry.
plus Vice, I mean, its response has been a lot more mixed than I think people were hoping for. I mean, yes, I know Adam McKay got in at the DGAs, but that has a much wider voting base than the directing branch at the Oscars, who I think there's a good chance a lot of them could feel that the directing isn't up to par with some of these other films.
Well, yes. Plus, let's face it. There's a lot of television people in the Directors Guild, and of course, Adam McKay has worked in television.
True, and then plus, I mean, Vice's acclaim has been nowhere near that of The Big Short, which I know Adam McKay did get nominated for in both directing and writing, and won for writing. So, but then again, The Big Short received like a lot more acclaim across the board for almost everything, and
Well,
Vice has been, while it's received a lot of acclaim for its acting, it's been more mixed everywhere else.
uh huh. Well,
So,
yes. Well, we shall see. Plus, in fact, a point I want to bring up, especially to your point regarding Barry Jenkins, you know, we have seen in the past where a filmmaker comes out with a big Oscar contender in terms of nominations and or wins, like Tom Hooper with The King's Speech, Catherine Bigelow with The Hurt Locker, and Danny Boyle's Slumdog Millionaire. Yet the following films they make, while they get Best Picture nominations, they do not repeat directing nods. Like, of course, like Danny Boyle, a couple of years after Slumdog Millionaire, he had 127 hours. While he did get in for picture and adapted screenplay, he was not included in the director's lineup. And of course, 2 years later, with both Catherine Bigelow back in contention with Zero Dark 30 and Tom Hooper back in contention for Les Miserables, neither of them got into the Academy despite receiving bids at the Directors Guild. Of course, Tom Hooper's is a little understandable since Les Mis was very divisive and Catherine Bigelow was definitely more of a shocker, although there was controversy surrounding that film. So still, could you see
and I
something? I'm
and I
sorry?
think I think that controversy is probably what might have shut her out of the category.
Yeah.
But in the case, but that kind of brings back to my case here, because with those films were mired by controversy, which might have prevented them from getting the directing nominations. Going back to Danny Boyle, 127 Hours generated a lot of controversy for the scene in which James Franco's character has to amputate his own arm to get himself free from the rock. And according to reports, when it like premiered at the Toronto Film Festival, some audience members passed out because it was too gruesome for them to watch. And I do know there were some critics who criticized the scene for maybe being more gruesome than it should have been, because it goes on, from what I hear, it goes on for like a solid 5 minutes. So perhaps voters were too grossed out by it to feel it warranted a nomination, or I don't know. Plus, in Danny Boyle's case, he hadn't really received too many directing nominations from precursors leading up to the Oscars for that movie.
Mm-hmm. Well, yeah.
So,
Plus Christopher Nolan was really probably had to have been the sixth place choice for Inception that year.
mhm. Yeah, he probably would have been. I think he would have gotten that nomination if the Coen brothers hadn't released their True Grit remake at the end of the year, because I think they kind of got the slot that I think many people expected Nolan to get.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But as I said, with Vice, it's gotten a lot of controversy, with some critics saying it makes Dick Cheney look too good, and I know there's some Oscar voters who might, a lot of them are very liberal, and there might be some who might be very liberal to the point where they don't think any film about Dick Cheney should be in the awards conversation. So, I mean, it all depends on the director. I mean, we'll see what happens. I do know there was a case of some Oscar voters anonymously told the LA Times that they would not nominate Clint Eastwood for Best Director for American Sniper because of his talking to an empty chair shtick at the 2012 Republican National Convention.
Yeah, well, although that at least didn't stop him from getting into Best Picture as a producer on the film.
No, but I think, yeah, I mean, it just any film that kind of portrays a right wing figure or takes kind of a right wing stance on something, it's going to run into risk with Academy voters, especially in like at the very least in the directing category.
Hmm.
Um,
Well, oh yes, and which also brings me to the person we both do not have getting in is Peter Farrelly for Green Book, because now reports recently resurfaced about how he flashed his penis on set of movies he made with his brother Bobby. And even though Peter Farrelly did recently apologize for that, but it did not come out. Well, it came out at the wrong time, right when in the middle of final nomination voting was ending. So there you go.
yeah, well, it'll be interesting to see if any voters were paying attention to the news because Peter Farrelly might not be as well known of a name as like say James Franco.
Oh yeah.
But I mean, so that'll be interesting to see what happens there.
Yes, and two more points. One, okay, well, a reason why I have Bradley Cooper ranked a little more in the middle is that while we have seen actor turned directors get in here before, there have been times where they do not get in, like Barbara Streisand when she was famously snubbed for directing Prince of Tides, Ron Howard when he was famously snubbed for directing Apollo 13. Of course, then again, they went for another actor turned director that year with Mel Gibson Braveheart. And then, of course, Ben Affleck getting snubbed for directing Argo, which didn't stop that film from sweeping through the season. So could you see it happening that Bradley Cooper could get snubbed from the directing lineup?
Uh, Possible, but I don't think it's gonna happen just because, I mean, me, I guess with like, because I guess Argo itself had its own controversy of being historically inaccurate in some aspects, and which maybe that helped hurt Ben Affleck there. I don't know, or maybe they just
Yeah, or it might have been a case of Academy members, well, directors commission the Academy feeling, well, he's safe, but I'm going to throw my support behind someone else, just assuming that he's so safe that he doesn't need their support at all, but no, not safe as they thought, which also might have been the case with Ron Howard and Apollo 13.
could be, but it's interesting you bring up those cases of snubs because yes, there were snubs, I guess, but they weren't necessarily their first time out as directing because like Prince of Tides wasn't Barbara Streisand's first film as a director,
That's true.
and all those other films you mentioned, they weren't those directors' first films either. But we have seen Academy members be impressed with directors, actors trying out directing and hitting it out of the park. I mean, Robert and of course a lot of the time winning. Robert Redford for Ordinary People, Kevin Costner for Dances with Wolves. Some people might say Mel Gibson for Braveheart, but that wasn't his directorial debut, which is
Yeah.
something many people don't know. His actual
Hmm.
directorial debut was a film called The Man Without a Face, which he directed 2 years prior.
Hmm. Yeah, so.
So I mean, with A Star is Born getting as much critical acclaim as it has, and Bradley Cooper getting in almost everywhere else, I mean, I don't see how he doesn't get a nomination at this point. Maybe with Ben Affleck, maybe the bizarre case with him was just the fact that he's had a lot more stinkers in his movie career than Bradley Cooper has.
Yeah.
I mean, Bradley Cooper certainly had his fair share of bad movies, but there was that one time where, like, pretty much from like 2000 to 2004, like almost every Ben Affleck movie was destroyed by critics. Pearl Harbor, Daredevil, Paycheck, Geely, Jersey Girl. I
Hmm.
mean, maybe some Academy voters were like, "Why should I nominate the guy who starred in Geely?"
Well, I mean, he at least reinvented himself since then.
Yeah, that was a bizarre. That year was a bizarre year from
Hmm.
which we'll probably never know truly why unless we literally interviewed every single member of the director's branch and asked them, why they didn't nominate him, or if they did, why didn't they put him in first place. So I mean, we'll never know, but
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, this will be interesting to see if, like, from now on out, we kind of saw last year with James Franco getting snubbed for the disaster artist. It'll be interesting to see here now from now on if the Academy will continue to separate art from the artist like they've done in years past with, like, Woody Allen and Roman Polanski, and I guess you could say Casey Affleck too.
And
Or
Mel Gibson 2 years ago for Hacksaw Ridge.
true, yeah. And so it'll be interesting to see if going forward if they'll continue on that pattern or if they'll go back to it. Because I mean, obviously, many Academy voters will have a big different. They'll obviously have different ideas of what's forgivable and what isn't.
Hmm. Yes, and the last point I wanted to bring up is okay, now I'm not predicting he only, and neither are you, and he only got in at Critics' Choice, but I did hear Andrew Carden's actually predicting him to get in, and that's Damien Chazelle for First Man.
Yeah, I saw his prediction as well. I mean, it's certainly possible considering that space movies have a good track record of getting nominated in this category or just being Oscar contenders in general. But even so, they still often at times have their bizarre snubs, like Ron Howard for Apollo 13, or in this recently Ridley Scott for The Martian.
Or Philip Kaufman for The Right Stuff.
Yeah, well, or yeah, or Christopher Nolan for Interstellar.
Well,
Although,
although that,
that film was controversial too. So
well,
with some
it
saying
also
it
had
was
a divided reception, so it wasn't too surprising.
no, but I personally would have liked to have seen him got a nomination for that because I really loved Interstellar a lot. I wasn't bothered by any of the criticisms people had towards it. But
Mhm.
then again, I am a big Nolan fan. Well, that doesn't mean I praise every film of his as a masterpiece, but I've never seen a film of his that I've hated.
Oh yeah. And well, yeah. Not to mention, oh, of course, we'll be getting to the below the line category soon. But I do have, I do have. I will say right away, I do have First Man doing quite well in the below the line categories, at least in terms of nominations, which I believe is the reason why Andrew is predicting Damien to get in.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's partly also the reason why I have Barry Jenkins in my best director lineup because I do think if Beale Street Could Talk will get a lot of below the line support.
Oh, okay, that should be interesting. I guess now moving on to the acting categories, starting off with Best Actor. Now, read off your current rankings.
All right, so this is going to be a big risk, and I have my super bet here, but I have my reasons for them. So my rankings right now are Christian Bale, Vice; Rami Malek, Bohemian Rhapsody; Bradley Cooper, A Star Is Born; John David Washington, Black Klansman; and Ethan Hawke, First Reformed.
Oh, I believe Matt Neglia is predicting that as well of the Next Best Picture podcast, as well as Zach Laws of Gold Derby.
Mhm. I haven't really paid too much attention to other people's rankings. I've done like
Well,
quick
well, I
glances of
mean,
like,
in the sense of they're predicting Ethan Hawke to get in, but not Viggo Mortensen.
okay. Well, like I said, I just did like kind of quick glances at like experts' predictions. I didn't like look for like I didn't necessarily center on certain people just because I try not if I do that too much, then I'm never going to decide for myself. But I do think it's while I know while I know Viggo Mortensen has gotten nominations everywhere else, I could possibly see his N-word controversy hurting him here. Granted, he did apologize for it, and as the stories go, he wasn't trying to insult people like the way Michael Richards was during when he infamously said the word. Because Viggo Mortensen was apparently trying to make a commentary about racism then
Well,
versus
yeah,
now.
plus that took place kind of a while ago at this point, so I don't know how fresh it is in voters' minds.
That's true, and Viggo Mortensen did apologize and didn't try to make some kind of excuse for it, like with Kevin Spacey tried to do when all the news came out about him. Um, but with some Academy members, particularly with people of color, I could see how that might make them not nominate him if they feel that's unforgivable. And plus, with Green Book being accused of being too lightweight by some, and being like too feel good. Like I remember I once read an article called Green Book and the Importance of Being Bad, in which the critic says that this film shouldn't have been so like positive and happy and should have been much more darker and like
Uh,
sad.
well, I've also heard some people complain well, criticize it for having it told from the perspective of Mortensen's character as opposed to Mahershala Ali's.
True, and for the fact that it was written and directed by whites instead of blacks, that could also but hurt that the film as well in the other categories, kind of like with directing and maybe writing as well. But yeah, but also I'm putting him here not just because of that, but we have seen in the past rare cases of actors seemingly looking like a lock based on getting nominated everywhere else, only to crash and burn with snubs on Oscar morning, like
Yeah,
Jake
Tom
Gyllenhaal for Nightcrawler and Amy Adams for Arrival.
Tom Hanks for Captain Phillips.
Yeah, and then so so I have John David Washington getting in here because he did get nominated at the Golden Globes and at the SAG Awards, which can be an indicator because SAG and the Academy share a lot of members,
Yes,
and BlacKkKlansman has, you know, the potential to be nominated in the big categories, which can certainly help spread the love to like
yes.
lesser known contenders.
Mhm. Yes, and even though he didn't get in at BAFTA, well, hey, his dad has a tougher luck with them as well.
True, and plus BAFTA often hasn't been the best at recognizing stories about African Americans in the past.
Hmm. Yes, and
Because they
well,
were, while they did give Best Picture to 12 Years a Slave, they also, and while they did give nominations to Moonlight in big categories, they didn't spread the love to Moonlight in below the line categories like the
well, yeah,
Oscars did.
well, yeah. Plus, if
Um,
of course we'll be getting to this later, but yeah, even if Beale Street Could Talk only got 2 nominations for screenplay and score.
mhm. Now, I'm not trying to say the BAFTAs are racist because I know they have been making, like the Academy, they have been making efforts to diversify their membership and I know they have rules for their outstanding British film category now where it says they have to be diverse in terms of representation of the subjects in their films. So, but I guess they don't I guess maybe their problem is they not enough of the members saw the movies in time to get it more below the line nominations. So, um, but with Ethan Hawke, getting to him, I know his chances seem low because of the fact that he's, apart from the Critics' Choice, he's been snubbed everywhere else.
Yeah,
But I,
plus he hasn't been doing really much campaigning for it because he's been busy. He's busy on Broadway right now in previews for True West with Paul Dano.
yeah, that's true. But you know, with he's been pretty much sweeping the Critics Awards, and while I know that isn't always the best indication of who will win the Oscar, I
Or
do
even
think,
get nominated.
yeah, but I think getting that many wins at least should at least inspire Academy members who haven't seen First Reform to at least watch it and see what the buzz is all about. And I think, and plus we, as Susan King wrote in a recent article for Gold Derby, the Academy has a very long history of nominating actors and actresses who play priests, nuns, or other religious figures. So there's the long legacy of Oscar voters liking actors playing religious roles, and he plays a very he plays a very troubled, conflicted priest who, doesn't necessarily have the same type of journey you would expect someone in a film like this to have. So plus I think, given that they've nominated him 4 times before, twice for acting, twice for writing, we know that he has a lot of support from several different branches of the Academy in the past. So while I admit this could come to bite me in the butt when nominations come out, we have seen in the past actors and actresses who got shut out at all the precursors still get their names surprisingly called, like Max
Michael
von Sydow in Extremely Loud and Incredibly
and
Close.
Michael Shannon twice.
Well, yes, but then again, Michael Shannon, like Ethan Hawke, he did get a lot of critics nominations for his role in Nocturnal Animals.
And gotten a Critics' Choice, I believe.
hmm Way more, way more than Aaron Taylor Johnson, which was part of the reason why well, I didn't predict. I don't believe I predicted either of them, but why I
Yeah,
didn't
I
predict
believe you
Aaron Taylor
predicted
Johnson.
Well, I believe you and I both predicted Hugh Grant to take the fifth slot for Florence Foster Jenkins that year.
Yes, but or the second example was Laura Dern for Wild.
Oh yeah.
She got uh, she got no precursor nominations, nor do I believe she got a whole lot of critics nominations last time I checked. But I mean, uh, so yes, I mean, while these we've seen nominations from time to time that seem to just come out of the blue, out of nowhere. But then looking back, you could kind of see the slow momentum, like with Michael Shannon and Nocturnal Animals. So plus, I think what could help Ethan Hawke here was the fact that First Reform did get a lot of acclaim out of Sundance, where it first premiered, and the fact that it's managed to stay with critics for so long is also a good sign. And plus, the fact that it's a Paul Schrader movie, and we've seen small indie films from Paul Schrader get nominations for its actors before, like with both Nick Nolte and James Coburn in Affliction, and
Yeah, but that
maybe
was 20 years ago.
true, but Paul Schrader hasn't really made a great movie in 20 years up until First Reformed. Most of his movies between Affliction and First Reformed have either gotten a meh or negative response from critics, at least ones that he directed. With Reformed, he both wrote and directed it. So it's his most acclaimed film in a very long time. And I think when you have directors kind of make a semi comeback after a series of bad films, I think that tends to get the Academy a little interested.
Well, which if the controversy surrounding Peter Farrelly doesn't end up being a factor, maybe Green Book is kind of considered a semi comeback for him since the last few movies he made with his brother weren't up to par with the ones they had at the start.
Yeah, plus Peter Farrelly, I think what will also hurt him is just the fact that his primary brand of film has been raunchy comedy, and usually raunchy comedy very rarely gets in at the Oscars.
Well, you'll tell that to Adam McKay when he got in for The Big Short a few years ago.
That's why I said very rarely.
Well, yeah, but are The Big Short and Green Book raunchy comedies?
No, but I'm just saying, like, I mean, Adam McKay, I guess his previous brand of raunchy comedy wasn't as gross out as Peter Farrelly's.
Hmm.
Because, yeah, I mean, well, because films like That's Something About Mary make jokes about body fluids without going into explicit detail about that. But anyway, I think oh, yes. Well, what are your ranks now?
I'm playing it safe by predicting the exact 5 nominees at SAG, which are Christian Bale, Rami Malek, Bradley Cooper, Viggo Mortensen, and John David Washington.
All right. I mean, I'm playing safe with most of my other acting categories, but I feel like the lead categories often like to throw in a shocker from time to time.
Which kind of is a perfect segue to the next category, Best Actress. And so the nominees, the rankings I have right now are Glenn Close, The Wife, Lady Gaga, A Star is Born, Olivia Colman, The Favorite, Melissa McCarthy, Can You Ever Forgive Me, and Yalitza Aparicio for Roma.
All right. Well, I have the same four, but in the fifth spot, I have Emily Blunt for Mary Poppins Returns.
Well, that could happen, but she's gotten in at Critics' Choice, Golden Globes, and SAG, but she did not get in at BAFTA. And you almost think on paper, oh yeah, BAFTA would totally go for her because she's a Brit playing a famous British nanny. Yet nope. And plus, let's face it, Mary Poppins Returns has been losing momentum in terms of awards recognition.
Well, yes. I mean, I'm not expecting it to be a huge, like, I'm not really expecting it to win any awards per se, but I do think we could kind of see a Blade Runner 2049 situation where, well, I know that film won 2 awards last year, but
And
like,
flopped at the box office.
well, yeah, but Mary Poppins Returns isn't a flop, unlike Blade Runner 2049, which was. But then again, well, with Mary Poppins Returns, it was this, given that it's a sequel to a beloved film, it could have gone wrong on all levels. But for the most part, it didn't. Most critics and audiences agree that even if it's not as good as the first film, it's still better than what it could have been if, like, if in any other hands, basically. And I do think with Emily Blunt, like, it seems some actors and actresses like seem to have like it's the year for them in terms of like their greatest successes both critically and commercially. And I think this year is Emily Blunt's year because I know for a long time she's been in films where she might have been critically acclaimed, but her films might have been box office disappointments, like say Edge of Tomorrow. And of
Oh,
course,
go ahead.
um, so I mean, I think with Emily Blunt, she's managed to, even if sometimes her films don't always get received critically, she can be well praised for them, such as her surprise SAG and BAFTA nominations for The Girl on the Train, a film which I think is very underrated, by the way.
Well,
But
yeah, and of course,
that
I'm sorry.
that that film wasn't that well received when it came out, but people at least took notice of her performance. So that so
Well,
that that kind of has started paving, I guess, the stepping stones for her to get like more recognition in the future. And I think this year with her success last year with both Mary Poppins Returns and A Quiet Place, I think given that Mary Poppins Returns came out much later much later in the year, and the fact that she did manage to get nominated at least 3 of the 5 big precursors, that will kind of help her chances here, like, kind of as a way to both acknowledge her performance as well as kind of reward her for the successful year that she's had.
well, or at least recognized because she ain't getting a trophy.
No, and that's not what I meant. I meant, like, the nomination would be the reward.
Well, yes, but here's the thing. Well, okay. Here's the problem. Okay. Here's a few things. Like I've read people complain that yes, that role did win Julie Andrews an Oscar for the original, but that was way back in the 1960s, a completely different time and completely different Academy back then. And plus, I
But
mean,
well,
I'm sorry.
but here's the thing, though, like, that was almost kind of you could kind of say an anomaly because almost no other performer before or after has gotten a nomination or a win for a Disney film.
Well, you could say Meryl Streep for Into the Woods.
Well, yeah, but I meant like in terms of like Disney's most like classic film lineup, very rarely in the past or in the present have they ever gotten acting nominations. So I don't know necessarily think it was just the Academy's lineup. Plus, in 1964, Mary Poppins was one of the most critically and commercially successful films of that year.
Oh,
So
well,
it was
yes. I'm sorry.
so it was kind of a no-brainer back then for them to nominate it across the board.
Well, yeah, but Mary Poppins Returns is not as acclaimed as the original.
No, but with Rob Marshall, we know that the Academy likes to nominate performers in his films, even if they don't always get the greatest critical reception.
Well, yes, although I remember seeing Andrew Carden post on Twitter a while ago saying, well, if asking if Blunt could follow a similar trajectory to the lead actress from his film Memoirs of a Geisha, who gets in a lot of the precursors, yet doesn't get nominated by the Academy.
Possibly, but I just think that if getting in at least getting in at SAG, I think helps her. I'm not saying she will confidently get nominated, but like I feel she has a much better chance than Yalitza Aparicio, just because while she may have gotten in at a Critics' Choice, she hasn't really gotten nominated anywhere else. And while I do
Well, it
think
does
Roma
kind of play to the point you made about Ethan Hawke, though.
true, but it's oh, I'm sorry, my dog is just going crazy. I gotta calm him down.
Okay.
No,
Well,
I can hear him barking nonstop.
okay.
If I don't shut him up, he's never gonna stop.
Okay, so I guess while we wait for Alex to get back, a point I also wanted to bring up was, well, okay. Well, for one, the Academy, especially with them trying to add more diversity in the actors branch, I could just see them wanting to rally around Yalitza, especially, well, or Viola Davis for Widows, just to avoid an all-white Best Actress lineup, so they can at least throw in some diversity in there. Plus, let's face it, and a point I also want to try to make about Mary Poppins is that, it's not the kind of role people would recognize nowadays. Plus, I heard people complain that Emily Blunt isn't really in the movie that much. I mean, she doesn't have like a huge effect or anything, but hopefully Alex gets back soon.
Well, it turns out my dog's excited because he wants to go for a run with my mother, hence why he's barking so much.
Huh. Well, anyway, back to Best Actress. I was explaining to whoever was watching this while you were gone. Okay, well, another reason I have Yalitza, well, actually 3 reasons. One, if, I'm expecting her to get in based on the potential strength for Roma. If she gets in, it's definitely a sign of how strong Roma is as a contender. And 2, with the Academy really adding more diverse people in the actors branch, I could just see them wanting, at least probably wanting to try avoid an all-white Best Actress lineup. Like, I could see her getting in, or maybe even Viola Davis for Widows, who did surprisingly get in at BAFTA.
Mm. Yeah. Well, I mean, and then if I'd probably put her in my 6th place slot if we had one. I just feel that like the lack of other precursor nominations could possibly hurt her, and it would just depend on how many voters have actually seen Roma. I'm sure many of them will have already seen it nonetheless, but like I know some people have criticized Roma for being too slow paced at times, so maybe
Well,
that could possibly factor into her not getting nominated if that
well,
does
why
happen.
would
But
she be affected by Roma being a slow burn?
well, I mean, this is her first time as an actress, and while we have seen a lot of other actors and actresses get nominated for their debuts, sometimes being a debut actor or actress not might hurt them in terms of the eyes of the actors watching them.
Well,
Like they're I mean, we'll see. I just feel like with Emily Blunt, I think there's been a lot of people who would have liked to have seen her get nominated for something at some point in her career by now.
I
And I feel
prefer
like
to get in for. Sorry. Go ahead.
and I just feel like they've been kind of waiting for like that one movie to come along so that they can say that's it. And I think this might be the chance this year.
Well, yeah, but don't you think the Academy members, especially as we saw with Mary Poppins getting shut out at the Golden Globes, which I predicted, and also getting shut out by Critics' Choice despite having a lot more nominations there, do you think the industry might be having since been there, done that? Like, they appear to be more about moving forward as opposed to looking back.
Well, in the case of if you're trying to compare like other live action Disney films,
Well,
in
not
those,
just
in those
those, which it also might have been the case with Star Wars. This when a lot of people were expecting The Force Awakens to make the cut for Best Picture, but didn't.
well, I think in those cases it was just more of like what will this franchise do now that it hasn't, now that we're not in the now that George Lucas isn't in control. It was just they were just wanting it to see if it could be without him at the and in the case of like all other Disney movies, those being just live action remakes, those were kind of I think just acknowledging what
You're breaking up.
well, with Disney films, I think if you're talking about like live action remakes of old classics, it was just recognizing what was maybe slightly improved upon by going live action, like with either costume design or visual effects. But, like I said before, with Rob Marshall films, we've seen how many performers got nominated for Chicago, with Catherine Zeta-Jones even
Well,
winning.
yeah, but
We
that's the
saw
thing. He hasn't been a factor in the Best Director race since Chicago.
No, I'm not expecting him to get a directing nomination at
Well,
all, but
yes,
I'm just
but well, I'm sorry. What I mean is, well, he hasn't had a big Oscar player since then, at least.
no, but I'm just saying Mary Poppins Returns is probably his most critically acclaimed film since Chicago, and that I think could at
Yeah, but
least
it still has its share of detractors.
right. But I'm just saying it stands a better chance of getting a few more below the line nominations, which could possibly help Emily Blunt here the same way you think it could help Yalitza Aparicio for Roma. I just think that with Emily Blunt's case, she took on a role that almost that would be impossible for anyone to live up to, but rather than just copy and paste what Julie Andrews did, she made it her own while still kind of honoring the image of what people associate with Mary Poppins. So I think
Yeah, well, yes, but here's the thing: that's not the kind of role people recognize nowadays. Like what I mentioned when Julie Andrews won for the original, that was a completely different time and completely different Academy back then.
true, but also keep in mind many of today's Academy members, if they weren't maybe they were young when they saw Mary Poppins in theaters, or maybe they grew up watching it on home video. So I'm sure for them, they probably at least went to see this movie for at least nostalgia's sake. So
Well,
I'm
yeah,
not
but
gonna
that's the thing. The industry doesn't appear to be crazy about nostalgia, especially as we saw with the Emmys this past year dismissing revivals of Will and Grace and Twin Peaks.
yeah, but those were kind of like kind of pick up immediately where we left off in a way, whereas this one is jumping many decades later.
Well,
So
you could kind of say the same thing about Twin Peaks and Will and Grace since the actors aged since their original series ended.
yes, but in those cases, it seems they were just simply trying to repeat the exact same formula as before. Whereas this, while it does take some of the same things, it also does some things a little differently.
Well, yes, but
I
that's the
think
thing. I've heard some people complain that it just felt too derivative of the original.
right, but I'm not going to necessarily say when I hear like the word some people, I have to remember that I'm not going to use just some people's complaint as like the basis for that's how it's all going to be. So I just
Well, I know, but it's at least worth taking into account.
right, and I'm not expecting Mary Poppins Returns to win anything at all, but I do think it's going to I do think it's going to get a number of nominations, maybe at least based on my predictions, probably around 5 or 6 at the very most, but
Oh, well, I have it getting in much less, but we'll get to more of those later.
yeah. Well, I mean, well, maybe not that high, but I'm predicting it to get a number of nominations at least. I don't think it's gonna be
Well,
like a
well,
single-hander.
yeah, but here's the thing: a lot of the below the line people aren't in the actors branch. This is actors nominating actors.
Yes, I know, and I'm just saying, I think with Emily Blunt, I mean, having at least 2 performances to choose from, while that can often hurt people, like in the case with Ryan Gosling when he had 3 films in 2011, I think with at least 2 films that are very different and she's being campaigned as lead for one and supporting in another, although
Although
they
they,
can
although
they
they
can
can do whatever they want, like we saw with Kate Winslet in 2008, campaigning as lead for Revolutionary Road and as supporting for The Reader, and she gets nominated as lead for The Reader.
yeah. Well, in that case, that did make sense because she clearly was the lead. But I mean, I don't know. I just think it's there's always just it seems every once in a while there's like that sense of oh it's their time for recognition in the industry, kind of like what we saw with Sarah Paulson when she finally won an Emmy for People versus O.J. Simpson. I think people
And
felt
could
it
be
was
the case with Glenn Close this year.
true, but I think like in terms of like actors who've like haven't really gotten enough awards recognition at least, or at least lesser known actors having not gotten enough awards recognition, there comes a time where it's like, oh, it's their time now for at least some recognition. So
Well,
that's kind of my main reason why I think she'll be nominated. But
Well,
yeah, I think uh,
I have a super bet on this category, and plus, I do think Emily Blunt with the two films she's campaigning for that could split her support. Like, in fact, I'd much rather see her get in this year for A Quiet Place than Mary Poppins.
well, I mean, if she were to get in for either, I'd be happy. Because but I think well, I think we're at an. I think at this point we just have to agree to disagree because otherwise we'll be here forever.
Well, yes. Plus, that's pretty much all I got right now. In fact, speaking of recognition, okay, I guess now it transitions into Best Supporting Actor, and I believe it's is it your turn to go first?
I believe so.
Yeah, you went Best Picture. I got Director. You went Actor. I got Actress. Yeah, it is your turn.
All right, so my lineup is Mahershala Ali, Green Book, Richard E. Grant, Can You Ever Forgive Me, Adam Driver, Black Klansman, Sam Elliott, A Star Is Born, and Timothy Chalamet, Beautiful Boy.
I have those exact same five, although slightly ranked differently. I actually have Sam Elliott in third place, though I could see myself alternating, switching Adam Driver up a bit, since Sam Elliott hasn't been getting in everywhere like a lot of us predicted he would early on. But then again, he is that, talk about an actor who's never been recognized by the Academy. This is the one I could see. This is one I could just see. I mean, talk about now. Sam Elliott is a veteran actor who's never been recognized by the Academy, so I could at least, if even though they're two separate categories, I could at least see Academy members wanting to nominate Sam Elliott before Emily Blunt, feeling that she has many years of more roles to come.
Possibly, but I think with Sam Elliott, I have him slightly lower because of the fact that he's been snubbed in areas like Golden Globes and BAFTA.
Well, which are the more foreign groups?
True, but also I do think that with Sam Elliott, he doesn't have as much screen time in A Star Is Born as say Adam Driver in Black Klansman, where Adam Driver he's just as important to the story as John David Washington, and therefore he has more of a chance to make his impact on screen, whereas Sam Elliott probably only has about 15 minutes of screen time total because there are huge gaps in the movie where he comes and goes and he's good in his scenes, but I could see some voters, even if they nominate him, I don't see him winning because I don't think he has enough scenes to make an impact, because even you can still win with little screen time, but you need
Like
to
Judi Dench in Shakespeare in Love.
or the all-time record Beatrice Straight Network. She had only 6 minutes of screen time, but she had one very powerful speech that made you sympathize with her because she was I never a good enough wife for you when she learned her husband was cheating on her.
Yeah, and we even sing probably we've also seen a very short performance in Midnight Cowboy get nominated.
hmm But yeah, but I mean, I guess in this case for Sam Elliott, kind of like Emily Blunt, if he were to be nominated, the nomination itself would be the reward for him.
Hmm. Yes.
But it would be nice at least for him. Not if he were to be nominated, it would be nice for him then because then both he and his wife would be Academy Award nominees.
Yeah, Catherine Ross. Yeah.
Yeah, and of course her nomination came more than 50 years ago for The
For The
Graduate.
Graduate. Yeah. So I guess now all on to Best Supporting Actress. Now it's my turn, and well, this is interesting because Regina King, now she's been sweeping a lot of the Critics Awards, won both the Globe and Critics' Choice. Yet was not recognized by SAG nor BAFTA, and I do have her getting in, but well, and well, okay, so now and although, okay, as of now, I mean, we'll see what both SAG and BAFTA say, but I actually have Amy Adams in first place right now because I do have her winning the SAG, and I don't know about BAFTA, which she could win, but it doesn't feel as sure as SAG. But yeah, so my lineup is Amy Adams, Vice, Regina King, If Beale Street Could Talk, Rachel Weisz, The Favorite, Emma Stone, The Favorite, and Claire Foy, First Man.
I have the same five ladies, but while I have the same bottom three, I'm still going to go out on a limb and predict Regina King will win and Amy Adams in second because, well, while the snubs at SAG and BAFTA could hurt Regina King, and I know some people may feel, well, Amy Adams is overdue because she's been nominated 5 times before. I guess, well, with Regina King, she has probably one of, if not the most important scenes in Beale Street in If Beale Street Could Talk without giving away spoilers. Whereas Amy Adams, while she has her good moments in Vice, she doesn't really have like the one scene that I think like stir changes the course of the movie, because it seems the supporting players often win in scenes they have, which kind of either make the movie go a 180 or provide a significant progression in the plot.
Although I've heard Chris Beecham make this point before, like, well, at the Emmys at least, that how when Kim Basinger won Best Supporting Actress for L.A. Confidential, like, when people think about the movie, is her performance really the first thing that comes to mind? No, there's several others, but there was a lot of men in that movie, and they were all canceling each other out in terms of nominations. Well, Basinger was the only one who was constantly getting in and winning.
Yeah. And I know a lot of people try to compare this to the Sylvester Stallone Creed situation, but the big difference between that King and Stallone is the fact that Regina King has won a lot of the critics awards, pretty much been sweeping them, whereas Sylvester Stallone almost won none of them, wasn't really even nominated for any of them. And I think a lot of people just felt, well,
Well, plus Regina King is much more respected as an actor than Stallone.
yes, exactly, because I think with Stallone, a lot of people kind of let their Rocky nostalgia blind them a bit. You
Well,
know,
which could be a similar case with Mary Poppins.
well, yes, but I do think like I said before, I'm not predicting Mary Poppins to win anything, and
Well,
but I think it's going to get nominated for several things. But with Regina King, she does have a much more acclaimed career, and I know there might be some debate of whether or not she's more of a television or a film actress, because I know she did get started on television in her teens with the sitcom 227, and she's had several acclaimed TV series like Southland, American Crime, and she's going to be in the new Watchmen series. But
and she's won 3 Emmys in the past, which were shockers. And it's interesting because
well, her first Emmy wasn't necessarily a shocker, but
but
her other two were.
well,
But
yes, and
but
it's interesting
clearly
how
she
she keeps. Oh, sorry, continue.
But I mean, she clearly, has a lot of goodwill in the industry, at least for the most
Yes,
part.
yeah, which is definitely possible. Which is why I think she could still win. I mean, if both SAG and BAFTA end up choosing any of the other nominees, then that's the one to watch out for.
Yep, that's true. But we could also very well see a Marcia Gay Harden or a Christoph Waltz situation
Well,
here.
yeah, although Christoph Waltz was at least nominated and won the BAFTA for Django Unchained.
Yeah, that is true. But I do think at least if anything, with performances like Marcia Gay Harden in Pollock or Mark Rylance in Bridge of Spies, it shows that there are voters who won't just name check off someone just for whatever reason, that they will actually sit down and watch the movie and then make the decision afterwards. And I think
Mhm.
with If Beale Street Could Talk being Barry Jenkins' follow up to Moonlight, and for being the kind of movie that it is in a Trump climate, and for you know the fact that Regina King, she's been like a supporting player in a lot of films for so many years, films like Jerry Maguire, Ray, and many, many others. And
And Do the Right Thing. Oh, right, not Do the Right Thing. Boys in the Hood.
mhm. So I could see, well, maybe not necessarily a lifetime achievement award per se, but I could see them possibly wanting to give it to her, not not only for this film, but also kind of like as a way to honor her for her body of work so far, I guess.
Hmm. Well,
Plus,
okay.
plus she has been actively campaigning.
Well, yes.
She has been trying to spread the word about the film and trying to arrange for screenings of it in predominantly black neighborhoods and things like that. So I could see voters wanting to recognize her for trying to spread awareness about a film which otherwise would have probably gone completely under the radar.
Well, though I've heard Matt Nigley of the Next Best Picture podcast explain that the thing he's waiting for is Oscar nomination morning, seeing how both Vice and If Beale Street Could Talk do in nominations.
Yeah. I mean, I think Vice will get nominated for some big stuff, but I don't see it getting nominated in tons of things. Whereas I think If Beale Street Could Talk will probably do better than it has at some of the other precursors.
Well, okay, we shall see. So I guess now moving on to the screenplay races. Best original screenplay. It's your turn.
All right, and where? Hold on, where is it on here for me? All right, there it is. So my rankings are The Favorite, Roma, Vice, Eighth Grade, and First Reformed.
Oh, okay. I'm completely different from you right now. I have The Favorite, Green Book, Roma, Vice, and A Quiet Place.
Hmm. I mean, I was tempted to put in A Quiet Place, but I don't know which one I would take out here to put it in as a replacement. I think, um, well, The Favorite and Roma, they're locks. I think Vice will probably get in because it is a very well written film. Adam McKay did win an Oscar for the screenplay for The Big Short, so
Mhm.
that I think will help him here. I think the Academy has more respect for him as a writer than as a director.
Well, yes, and well, yeah, I can understand you leaving Green Book out, given the reports of not only Peter Farrelly but also of co-writer Nick Vallelonga, who was the song of real life subject. Given his anti-Muslim tweets from a few years ago.
As a direct response to Donald Trump too.
Hmm.
So that, yeah, if voters were paying attention to that, I can just see them saying, "Nope."
Yeah, and of
Well,
course,
then
then
again, of course, that would depend on how forgivable of a controversy is that for them. Yes, and I do think I have eighth grade in here because I think given all the acclaim it's gotten, they're gonna want to give it recognition for something. And if it's not going to get like a Best Picture nomination or director or actress nomination, even though it would be deserving for all of those, in my opinion, it's the type of film where films about kids in middle school or high school, they can often be very cliched or over dramatic,
or skew
or like
very young.
or just feel like very Hollywoodized, I guess. This one is very, I guess it kind of strips away the Hollywoodization and tries to show what being an eighth grader really is like. And I guess it certainly helps that Bo Burnham is still pretty young himself. He's only 28. So therefore he probably has a lot of memories of his own time in eighth grade. Um, Plus, it's a lot of critics have showered praise on it for the writing, and it did get in at the WGA.
Yeah, so did A Quiet Place.
So I feel if it's gonna get any recognition, it's gonna be here. Because with these coming of age movies, the thing that often hinges most on anything is the writing. We saw Lady Bird, which is a coming of age movie, get recognized for this, and way back in the 1980s, Stand by Me only got one Oscar nomination, but it's that nomination was for its screenplay.
Yeah, and well, yes, though I do not have First Reform getting in, giving that well, it did win the Critics' Choice. That's the only major recognition it's received so far. Plus, let's face it, the screenwriter and director of that movie, Paul Schrader, he does not come across well as a nice guy. And he comes across more as a curmudgeon, and especially with the controversy surrounding him especially of how he said he wanted to make his next film with Kevin Spacey, which is not looking good for that hope right now.
Yeah, but I think in that case, he kind of admitted that he knows that's never going to happen in terms of making a movie with Kevin Spacey. And I guess in this case, given that it's reformed, it's kind of managed to stay around despite being released in the early summer. I just have a feeling they'll want to at least finally recognize him with a nomination for something, given that he's never been nominated for anything before. Like many people probably assume he's gotten Oscar nominations for writing Taxi Driver or Raging Bull, but he never did.
Hmm.
So I feel this might be, if they're going to do like a makeup nomination to make up for previous snubs, I have a feeling this might be it. I don't think he's anywhere close to getting a directing nomination because he's always been more respected as a writer than a director. But I think given that First Reformed does portray both religion and environmentalism and does it in a way that makes you think about what you're watching, I have a feeling that could help it here.
Well, we shall see. Nah, and Well, yeah, and if there was a sixth slot, I'd definitely be putting eighth grade in there. Well, then again, the last slot to me is definitely between Quiet Place and eighth grade, and I guess First Reformed as well. But and in fact, if eighth grade were to get in, then yeah, that'd be a deserving nomination. I did finally watch that film a couple of days ago, and yeah, Burnham, yeah, he'd totally be a deserving nominee for screenplay. But I could just have a feeling that the newer Academy members are probably going to. I could just have a feeling they're going to recognize A Quiet Place here.
Mm, it could, but I also feel like eighth grade, it's one of those films that really is a writer's film, I guess you could say. Like, if there's one thing that I think film school students in the future will constantly go back and look at for that film, it'll be its writing.
Yeah, true, but we shall see. We shall see what happens. So now moving
Mhm.
on to the final category of this slugfest, and that's best adapted screenplay. And the nominees and my predicted nominees are Black Klansman, If Beale Street Could Talk, Can You Ever Forgive Me, A Star Is Born, and Black Panther.
That's my exact same lineup as well.
Aha, great.
I was I was torn between this and I think maybe First Man and a couple of others for the fifth spot, but then remembering that Logan managed to get into this category last year with no other nominations, that seemed to give a sign that they are willing to recognize superhero films at least for their writing. So, and
Well,
Given Black Panther did get into the WGA and the
like
Critics'
Logan did
Choice,
last year.
yeah, given that it's precursor awards, that makes me more comfortable with predicting it here.
Well, yes. Yes. Hmm. Yeah, and yeah, First Man I could see being possible. It got in at Critics' Choice, and it got in at BAFTA, which is more important.
Hmm. Yeah, and as a BAFTA, Black Panther only got one nomination for visual effects.
Yeah, and in fact, actually saw a tweet from Scott Feinberg last night of the Hollywood Reporter. Okay, let me. I'm looking it up here. Okay, he retweeted someone's tweet saying, "Okay, let me see." Oh, okay, I find it. Okay, yeah. Oh, okay. He retweeted a tweet by a guy named Guy Lodge. Okay. He said, starting to think Black Panther will not get Best Picture nomination, and while I have no strong feelings about the film, I am so not ready for that furor. Well, I tried my best pronouncing it, so I apologize, but that
Mm.
in any case, oh yeah, and Scott Feinberg said its support seemed to evaporate when push came to shove. Not sure why, but BAFTA abandoned it, and the Academy members did so too.
Mm. Well, I mean, I think it's still going to get nominated for a bunch of the below the line categories
Me
just because
too.
it's been getting nominated at the guilds, but I don't necessarily think it's going to go in the direction of the Critics' Choice Awards and actually win any of its below the line nominations.
Well, I think it still could, but of course we're talking about nominations right now. But hey, at least here's a lineup you and I are exact on.
Hmm.
All right, so thank you everyone for watching. We'll be back soon with the next Slugfest, which will cover the below the line categories.